indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we had new agendas placed in front of us. A couple new things. We have some new board hires to approve, a new thank you, and that is it. So with that, I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into dates to remember, October 22nd is the next Board of Education meeting at 5:30 in the IP. October 22nd and 23rd is the middle school parent-teacher conferences from 3:30 to 6:45. November 1st and 5th is the second and third grade parent-teacher conferences from 3:30 to 6:45. November 6th and 8th is the fourth and fifth grade parent-teacher conferences from 3:30 to 6:45. November 7th is an early release. November 11th is Veterans Day holiday. November 12th is the next Board of Education. There's some further dates to remember on the agenda posted on the website as well. Moving into community input for items not on the agenda. I see nobody running to the microphone, so we will move into item number 7, conflict disclosure and consideration of waivers. We have no items there. Number 8, consent agenda. The superintendent of schools recommends approval of the following: approval and/or correction of minutes of previous meetings, consideration and approval of bills, approval and/or correction of the financial report, board approval of new hires. As previously mentioned, classified personnel, substitute teachers, classroom aides, and volunteers must be approved. We have some new hires here: Leslie Tobkin, transportation dispatcher; Jonathan Mullen, transportation department; Pamela Rasmussen, Huron High School credit recovery supervisor; Uba Osman Ali, substitute teacher; also substitute paraeducator and substitute food service and on-call interpreter; Mary Moe, TAP classroom leader; Jake Thielbar, varsity wrestling assistant coach; Matt Rudebush, transportation department driver; Patricia Weirman, site greeter, classroom leader; Sydney Muntz, site greeter, classroom leader, substitute site supervisor; Tanya Lieferman, sped paraeducator at the middle school; Charlotte Fries, substitute teacher; Marietta Riedel, substitute teacher; and Emma Landstrom, substitute teacher. We have no contracts for board approval. We have 2 resignations. Christy Whitney, sped education paraeducator at Washington for 3 years, and Gilla Henkel, food service at the middle school in Buchanan for 18 years. We have 1 request approval of open enrollment students returning to Huron School District after the August 1st deadline. Administration has received an open enrollment request, RH-2018-06 and RH-2018-07 for board approval. The consent agenda may be approved with 1 motion. However, if a board member wants to separate an item, they may do so. I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. I will hand it over to Mr. Nebelseck now as he celebrates successes in the district.
Thank you, Mr. Bischoff. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to congratulate the marching band. They're in the middle of a wonderful marching season. I had the opportunity to see the band at Howard Wood Field this last week, and their show was just outstanding, and they are representing us the highest levels. And so we've got a lot of activities going on right now. I think I've seen 1 of each activity minimum, and that was the last one that I'd gotten to see. I'd seen Cheer and Dance when they were in town, and so anyway, they're off to a fantastic season. Our thank you comes from the Buchanan K-1 Center, who, of course, we call for thank yous to come in from all over, and they would like to thank the following business people and individuals for generous donations to the school. Sands Incorporated donated school supplies. Jack Link Beef Jerky donated jerky that was given out during the homecoming parade. Jensen Feed Store allowed us to house their float in the shed, provided a pickup to pull the float, and employees to help driving and putting the finishing touches on the parade route. And they also help take care of it at the end of the parade. And thank you to the Huron Area Credit Union and HRMC and Josh Lane of the National Guard, who all donated to Buchanan in the early part of the school year. Thank you to Dakota Provisions for supplying the TAP program with fluorescent vests to be worn by the playground supervisors for easy identification. Mr. Bischoff?
Thank you, Mr. Nebelsack. Next, we're moving into reports to the board. First up, we have Rodney Middlestead with his good news report.
Board members all have this in their board packets?
Yes.
I think so, yes.
So it's more of an ESL report than strictly title?
Is the button out?
Pardon me,
Out.
it's out now.
Okay.
Can you hear it better? Okay, pardon me. So it's more of an ESL report than just all title. But I thought I'd present to you this evening some figures on our enrollment, our ESL enrollment. And you should have a double-sided sheet there, and I'd like you to look first at the side that says at the top ESL student information 2017-18, and then totals as of October 5th. And you can see there our ESL enrollment broken down by grade and school. And you can see Buchanan sits at 204, as does Madison School. And Washington at 121 total, and middle school at 94, and the high school at a total of 172 students. And then 13 in each of our colonies. Again, keep in mind, this is as of last week. We enrolled a few students last week, so the number will change a little bit, and we have some enrollments scheduled for this week as well, so this fluctuates a little bit as we go. I think it's important to note as you look at that, a couple things. One is that this represents 31% of our K-12 enrollment total. So our 821 students is about 31% of our total enrollment, K-12. And then people often ask, you know, why Buchanan School and Madison School have a lot more than Washington? And one reason is because those students test out of ESL by the time they get to grades 4 and 5. So that's a testament to both to our ESL teachers and our general classroom teachers who are doing a good job with them, and also to those students who really work hard and pick up the language quickly. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see a dip there in the numbers as they get to upper elementary and middle school. And then, and it, you know, it has what to do with the number of students we get as well. And you can kind of see that if you flip the page and look at the other side, where you see an ESL comparison over the years, and this is over the past decade. And if you look at where we sit at the very bottom there, currently 821 students, and only 27 of those are first year in the country. So, you know, there was a period about 5 or 6 years ago or so where we were getting more students who were first year in the country at all grade levels. And anyone who taught at the time knows that the students were almost, it seemed like they were constantly coming into your class as new students throughout the year. So we received a lot more students at the different grade levels, K through 12. So, you know, it'll take some of those students a little bit longer to grasp the language if they came in upper elementary or middle school or high school. So the number of first year in the country students that we receive now is less than it used to be. So that is something of an explanation for those numbers on the other side. Last year, we began the year about this same time with 810 students, and we're 821 right now. There was a point during the year last year where we topped out at about 826, 827, somewhere in there, and then it shrank back down to 810 by the end of the school year last year. So, you know, we currently stand at about the highest number of ESL students we've ever had in our district. I think it's interesting to look back at the last decade and see where we were about 10 years ago as compared to now, and how much growth we've had in this area. And then to go along with that, and I believe you also have this on another page you have from me there, but the nation's represented currently in our school district in terms of ethnicity and language, with the United States, Thailand, Burma, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Belize, Micronesia, Somalia, Honduras, Peru, and the Dominican Republic. So quite a broad representation there. I think another point to keep in mind too is, these numbers just represent students who are in our ESL program. So we have other students who are, either hail from these countries or identify with some of these countries who aren't in the ESL program because they've tested out now and are just no longer receiving those extra services. So we have a higher number of those students overall in our district. These are just ESL numbers.
Over the past few years, our enrollment has really gone up as well. Do you know if our percentage has kind of stayed the same? Is that 31%? Is that kind of close
Pretty-
to where we have been?
Yeah, that's pretty close. Yep. It's always kind of been around that number.
Based on our funding, the key is, and our legislators really appreciate this, but we tend to graduate as many out of the program by reaching a 4 on the access as we bring in new. And so, Mr. Christopherson, I think I'm within line of saying that our state support stays fairly steady based on the number coming in new and the number that they don't leave the school, they graduate out of the program.
I really like this breakdown by building and grade that you've got here. Is this the way it's been in the past too? Typically at those lower grade buildings is where you've seen the most ESL students then too?
Yes, in recent years it has. Well, like I said earlier, 5, 6
Right,
years
they're
ago or so.
graduating out,
Yeah, they were,
yes.
yeah, it was more evenly spread out.
Yeah.
You see a trend too that some of the people who have come in the last 5 to 10 or more years, to 10, 12 years, are now having, they maybe were older students at the time and they've become young adults and now they're starting to have their own children and those children are coming into the bottom of our educational system. So yeah, some of the growth is from those people who moved here and stayed.
Does anyone have any other questions? Oh,
Kurt, did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Whoops, let me, just a second, let me turn this up. Go ahead.
The handout shows nations currently represented. Are those in any particular order, Mr. Middlestead, or are they just kind of random? Are they percentage-wise as to the number of students?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
It would, Kurt, it would look to me, just on longevity of watching it, that the United States, then Thailand, then Burma, then Puerto Rico, then Mexico certainly would represent the highest percentage of our students. We get a lot of American kids from Puerto Rico right now, and Thailand, Burma is a combination of students, a lot of them Burmese that were in the Thailand refugee camp, and some of them are actually from Thailand. So I might be speaking out of line. They may not all be Karen, but the vast majority are Karen. And then Mexico would fall. So my only speculation from looking at it is that the top 5 would represent our highest population bases.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yep, I would agree with Mr. Nebelsick. The top 5 is probably pretty well set there, with Guatemala moving up the list, so it's not necessarily, it's a little, when you get to the middle of that list, it's hard to know right now where
That's right.
where they all fall, but yeah.
That's right.
great. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we will now move over to our business manager's report. Mr. Christopherson.
Okay, thanks. All I have tonight is a report on the general fund. So far, we have collected for revenue $3,304,000, which represents 16% of budgeted revenue. Last year at this time, we had collected $3,004,000, or 15%. And so far this year, we have spent $2,884,000, or 14% of the budget. Last year at this time, we'd spent $2,762,000, which was also 14% of that budget. That's all I have.
All right, do we have any questions?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have the preliminary number on enrollment? Because I know that that's a budget implication, and I did not ask you before it started.
Were we on count day, I think, which was the last Friday in September? We looked to be around 2660.
Right,
We were budgeted about 60 higher than that.
right.
We didn't grow like we thought we would with all the new jobs in town. I really can't explain what has happened, but if we were banking on at least growing by the difference in the amount between the graduating seniors and the incoming kindergartners, well, the kindergartners showed up like we thought, and that difference was there of about 70 to 80, and we only ended up growing around 50 in total.
So, just because that ties into the budget. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Moving into the superintendent's report, Mr. Nebelsack.
Thank you and good evening. First, I want to thank the board for supporting, allowing me to go with my parents and Diana on a trip with the folks, and that made it possible for them to go, and I'm very, very grateful that you allowed me to move a week of vacation into the school year. And it was a wonderful experience with my parents, and I'm very grateful for that. And when we get 3 to 4 inches of snow tonight, I want you to know that Diana and I are pre-adapted to it because we stood on a glacier on school board day 2 weeks ago. So we'll recognize the snow when it gets here tonight. I wanted to talk because there were questions that came in. This has to do with the election. Just as a point of reference, I know the board is aware of this, but we follow policy when it comes to making sure that we are very discerning about contact with our elected officials during the political season. When it's not in the political season, if one of the senators happened to be here for an assembly, fine, but we try to be very discerning during this time. And so I've been invited as the superintendent when both governor candidates were in town, and I've gone to both of those activities and had questions about education from both of the governor candidates. And the activity that the Nome campaign put on was a rental following policy. They worked through Mr. Radke and rented the facility. And so I just think it's important that that whoever's elected, that our school district is in good position to work with them, because there's such a close tie between the school boards and the legislature that I just wanted to clarify that. The other thing I want to talk about is we have a couple of assemblies this week. We had an assembly from a survivor of the time of the Holocaust, and we also have an assembly that was a request of the Huron Concert Association. And I appreciate the local interest in providing opportunities for our students. I attended as much of the one this morning as I could, and I thought our student body was very attentive and learning. But I would tell you that just personally, I get real nervous about lost classroom time during assemblies. And so we do have a lot of requests from different interests in the community to bring in assemblies. And if you hear that we tend to be hesitant, that is true. And that's because of classroom time. These just happened to land on the same week, and we accommodated the community folks who provided them, and we're grateful for that. The other thing I would share tonight is that both of your directors went to Title IX training today. I elected to go along. I wanted to find out. It's been about a decade since I went through that training, perhaps a little longer. And it amazes me, the things that our federal government expects out of the school district when it comes to monitoring and investigating activities that do not happen within the school day or on the school campus. It's just simply amazing. And so we went through a lot of application training today on how to go through an investigation. They've created a procedures notebook, and we may be looking into a couple of policy investigations. It's going to take us a few weeks. We need to meet with the administrators over what we learned, but does our policy reflect what OCR expects it to along the lines with Title IX compliance? Both directors are here. Is that comfortable with that description of what was pretty intense training today in Mitchell? Got back just before the board meeting. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nebelseck. Moving into old business. Item A on old business is our brand identity guideline for the Huron School District. This is a first reading. Do we have the ability to put this on the screen up there? Probably not.
Well, we might. Can we make it so? Is it possible to pull that up since it was emailed? Mrs. Peets, do you have that on your computer?
Tiffany has it, I don't have it.
Okay. Well, it was emailed to some of us. You didn't see it, did you? Okay.
Well, if anybody cares to pull it up on the internet, is it on the internet?
Yeah,
that they can pull it
well,
up
they
there?
might be able to,
You can airplay too from your iPad up there.
that's what I was saying. You might be able to use that,
It's posted on our website.
Garrett. Mr. Sarter, are you able to take Mr. Bischoff's iPad and put it on the screen?
Should be able to do, can you connect that beacon AirPlay? The only way I can do is avoid AirPlays that way.
I can hear
On
you.
there. He has to project it to the Apple TV.
Hmm.
You got it?
You should, no, go
Right.
back to where you want to open up exactly what you want.
Okay.
And then you're just gonna screen mirror right to the IPC TV, you would assume? The IPC.
Oops.
Ooh,
Oh,
TV. And then that code you're gonna type in. And then you can pull that back up. And it's there.
Thank you, Brandy.
perfect. Look at that. All right. So in front of us here, we have the brand identity guideline for the Huron School District. This is a document that we've been working on with our branding initiative. Basically just gives guidelines as how the logo can be used. A lot of information in here. We had a meeting was that last week? Last week on Monday with some of the vendors in town that would be using the logos and putting it on apparel and other items. So we had a nice sit-down meeting with them, going through some of the do's and don'ts and how we were gonna go forward with all of this. Some of the discussion was on trademarking, and Craig, jump in, you kind of have spearheaded the trademarking aspect of the whole logo process and brand process.
Well, one thing that we found out, just kind of going through this whole process, is we have to have something like this in place so that we have a guide that we can say, look, this is how these can be used. They can be used, they can be used in the orange, black, and white. You can't have a pink H, you can't have a stretched H, you can't have a stretched Huron Tigers logo. So just kind of a informational meeting with these vendors to kind of get them on board and figure out what the easiest way for them to start implementing this in their stuff is going to be. The other thing that we found out is we have to kind of regulate our logo so that when somebody who doesn't have a license to use it uses it, then we can enforce that. And so that's kind of where this document came from, so that we've got and I think this is going to kind of be a document that will probably change over time, just because we don't know all the answers right now. And I had a call today on how does this fit in to, if we have a club that wants to use it, how does it work then? Well, nothing changes. If they want to use something from the branding package, that all stays the same. Whether it comes from us or whether myself as a parent wants to go down and have a t-shirt made, if I want the H on it, it's that H.
It's switched. They can see it on the screen.
What do we need, Randy?
Sorry, he needs the Apple, scroll all the way up. This switch to the booth, so they can see it. I need the code.
Yeah, let me see. 2738.
Oops, 22738.
There we go.
You can see it in there now.
We were rolling, I'm not sure what happened.
Oh, there we go.
being projected on.
I see.
Now we're projecting.
I see, now it's projecting out, so that'll be your guide up there now.
So I think that's kind of the purpose of this.
You know, I was watching the football game on TV the other night. The Midco Sports Network was carrying the O'Gorman Huron game, and they had our logo up on the screen there when they were showing the two school scores.
Mhm.
So it was neat to see the H logo on TV already.
Yeah, I think I've seen that logo all over the place now, that H. And that's the whole, we really want our local vendors to be partners with us on this and getting it out there and, having it on apparel and having it available for if a parent wants to come in and get something. But we're just figuring out the easiest way to keep track of everything and make sure the logo's used the right way. And like I said, we don't have a red H or a yellow H or something that's not in our brand standards.
I would add that I really appreciated the vendors coming in and guiding us, and they
Right.
guided us to becoming licensed vendors rather than licensed per product, like a bigger service. I thought you as board members made it very, very clear that you're not in it to seek a profit, but in order to protect it from being on a website where it would be inappropriate or on clothing that would be inappropriate. And I really appreciated the local vendors work with us. I've had some questions just in the last week. For instance, Mr. Nettinga, who's following this for the Plainsman tonight, I told him that my interpretation is that anything that is our product, he can use associated with school stories. He's not
Sure.
selling that product, he's not producing, it's what we want. We want our stories identified with the brand. Is that a
Yeah.
correct statement that I
Yes.
made
And
to Kurt tonight? And so that was one example. We had parents of an athletic team that's currently in place, so we're running out of days in order to order theirs. And as we've given other permission, I said this is in the process, but I know you're running out of time, so I gave them permission to use it. And then I explained to that vendor, who was an out-of-town vendor, that once this becomes a licensed trademark, we will expect them to participate in the annual licensing fee. And did not receive feedback from them, but gave them permission to proceed so that we didn't hurt our kids and parents in getting it out there right now. And so it's been well received, but we're going to try to meet again July 1 to see what we've learned in the last 6 months. And appreciate you board members doing the majority of the presenting, because this has really been a board-driven goal. And then I want to thank Mrs. Pietz's office, specifically Amanda, and Mr. Christofferson's office, specifically Tiffany, for just outstanding behind-the-scenes work in order to nurse this product along. Kelly, is there anything I'm missing that the public needs to know from what they're explaining?
I don't know, we need to talk about the vendor license form.
Please do.
Okay. So we will scroll up to the licensing. We'll put that up on the screen here. I believe that's right there. Yeah, that was the biggest part of our discussion. And Kelly, do you want to talk about that and what all that's going to entail?
Well, after we met with the vendors, we decided that the best way to proceed would be with a vendor license rather than try and collect royalties and license on every article that is produced, because that was never the school board's intent when they went into this. So we came up with a vendor license approval form where they fill out their business information, what kind of products they want to put this on, and then they agreed there should be a fee to try and control this, so they wanted to go with a $100 local vendor fee and a $200 vendor fee if it's not a local vendor. And we thought we needed a fine if things are misused or if things are made without a license. So tentatively, I've plugged in a fine of $250 if we find out that the brand identity guidelines are not being followed. And I guess that's up for discussion. We never really discussed that fine, the amount of that fine in the meeting, but I thought the fine should be more than the license itself. That's the only thing I kind of went by.
And then, board members, the other thing that's come up as I've processed these is time period of making people aware, because we've never had this before, and I'm assuming that when we find places that have made these, that if we send them the vendor application this first year when they were not aware and they want to participate in that way, I need some guidelines from you as to when it should turn into a fine, rather than trying to get them to sign up and be a licensed vendor. Craig, I was directly affected by your observations from a business climate that even though sometimes product is misused, there's also public relation issues with trying to get people in compliance without punitive, especially when we're teaching everybody how it's going to work. So any guidelines on is the fine that we put down appropriate, and how do we initiate to get there? Because certainly once we're rolling, then I'm glad that there's a fine, or else it's not fair to the vendors who are paying.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with education. I mean, I think as this gets solidified, and we had to do a little bit more on education. I mean, I think that meeting with that group of vendors was great, because now they're on the same page that we're on, and we're on the same page that they're on. And I think just getting people on that same page. I mean, you can't go onto legally, you can't go onto like Google and download the Nike swoosh and just do it and have that uploaded to some other website and make your own Nike t-shirt. You know, that goes against every trademark law that there is. Now, do people still do it? Sure they do. Are they supposed to? No, of course they're not. Now, I don't think that it's going to become an issue. Yeah, you'll have people who will do their one-off t-shirts, or you know what, we're going to get 5 hats made or whatever the deal is. But I think a lot of it is just educating the administrators and the students, and you know, some of these clubs that have their t-shirts made, like, look, we want you to use the H. We want you to use it in this way with these colors, because those are your school colors. That's your school logo. It's not just some random thing that we decided to make. I mean, it's awesome when you know, I was at the fair this year, and it was awesome to see all the H's. And you could identify, oh, that kid goes to Huron because of the H. It wasn't some random H. It wasn't, you know, just some mark. It was RH, which is what we want this thing to become. And so I think the more in compliance we can get, I mean, yeah, right now it's a little stumbly because it's the first time we've ever done it. And I think as we go, things will smooth out. Like I said, I had a phone call today, and I didn't know the answer, and my ego isn't big enough to where I think I know the answer to everything. So I called the person I needed to call, and we got the answer. And so, I mean, that's the big thing, is if you don't know, it's always easy enough to ask, and we can find out the answer. And like I said, I think the way not to use the marks will probably grow a little bit. But hopefully, you know, with that meeting coming up in July, it's going to be, this is what we learned, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. I mean, I don't expect us all to have the answers right now, because it's the first time we've ever done this.
I have just one comment. Is this going to be annual? Is it an annual fee? It doesn't say that anywhere on the application, and I don't know if it should. But if there's, as long as that understanding is written down that it is an annual fee.
And it's interesting that the vendors came up with that. With that, there should be a fee. That way then the people who are legitimately printing stuff, you know, whether it's signs or, yard signs or T-shirts or hats, they produce stuff at X quality. So they don't want
Right.
someone else to come in and produce a subpar product with our logo on it.
Right.
Because they're invested in this community just as much as we are. And they're like, look, we want it all represented at this quality, so there should be a fee. And I was like, $10? And they're like, no, it should be substantial because we don't want just everybody, $10 isn't that much money. So if it's, you gotta put some money into it, we don't have a problem with that. And so I thought that was pretty
I think it
interesting.
helps create some control.
Right.
A bit of a level of control over it. It's gonna be hard to watch every single thing that comes out.
It
Making
is.
sure that it's not, and so that's not the intention with this either. We have guidelines, what we've set, this is the idea behind it. And I think once people start understanding it, they're gonna have no problem coming to us and saying, hey, we'd like to use this logo or
Right.
whatever, with no intent to change it. And with the understanding that our local vendors have an investment in it, they know all of the do's and don'ts already. And so keeping that, again, a little bit more of a controlled environment on it will probably help police it a little
Right.
bit easier versus someone just standing there.
Yeah, and you're gonna run into that, like I said, where you're gonna see someone wearing a hat or a shirt that says Huron on it, and you're like, well, I wonder did you make that? No, did you make that one? No, I don't know who made that. Well, they got it online somewhere.
Oh,
But,
and there's still the understanding that people can use whatever they want.
right,
We're not trying to,
Yeah,
stop
if,
them from doing that.
if a German club or a Key Club or whatever wants to make their own shirt that says Huron on it, they can do that. They don't need to use our Huron. I would love for them to do that because, it's you want that out there. You want to identify with that. You don't have to. You can make your own wrestling shirt that has Tony the Tiger on it, in a wrestling shoes and headgear.
As long as it's not paid by the.
So long, yeah. As parents, if you're going to state and that's your state shirt or whatever it is, you don't have to use the VH unless it's being paid for by the school district, by taxpayers.
The feedback I'm getting, especially like the parents of the state events coming up, they want to use it.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
they're-
yeah.
They're anxious to get going.
That's the impression I'm getting from everybody.
Yep.
Just, when can we have this stuff? Come on.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it's one of those things, and that's like talking to our two local vendors who do shirts. They're like, we want to get stuff made and get it up because we
Yeah.
have people in asking for it.
Yep.
We've got every sport
Yeah.
coming up. They want to be prepared for it. They want to have stuff
Yep.
made for it.
And people like the new stuff.
They do.
Oh, I want the new logo.
It's a new look. It's sharp.
Right.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Well, this serves as our first reading for this, so look it over. If there's any changes, we can get those changed before our next meeting.
Garrett, because of our timeliness, I'm assuming I still have the latitude to continue to informally say yes, print it and go.
Absolutely.
Predicting on where it's going to go.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, moving into new business. Item A is selecting our Legislative Action Network representative. This is a little unrehearsed, but in the past, it's always been Tim, and
I've done it for 8 of the 9 years I've been on the board, so
Yeah.
I'd be willing to do it again unless somebody else wants to do it.
do we need an official motion and second on this? We do?
So moved.
We got a motion for Tim. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All right, let's go ahead and vote on this.
Thank you.
All in favor of nominating Tim as our Legislative Action Network representative, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Tim is our Legislative Action Network representative. Moving into item B, we are selecting our delegate for the ASBSD Delegate Assembly, which comes up here in November. I'm actually serving as a board member now on that, so I don't know that I technically should probably be a delegate as well. I don't know if I can or can't.
I don't know if
Probably
you can or
cannot.
can't, but do you get to go anyway?
I get to go anyways.
So getting to go anyway would allow us the latitude of a second if they're
Right,
interested.
right.
I think if no one goes, you have the right to be our voting delegate.
Right.
But when you're already there as a voice,
Right. And we actually need a nominee and an alternate, so if anybody would be interested in going out to delegate assembly, I'd be happy to serve as an alternate, just to,
My first year on the board, I was picked as an alternate, and by the time I got home from the meeting where I was picked as an alternate, I found out I was going to it. So,
it is a great experience.
when
I've
is the
gone-
date for that?
I'm not sure. I'd have to pull the calendar up. It's probably on the website. It's usually in November.
Right.
I want to say the second weekend. It's usually the Friday before deer season is what I usually remember it as.
That is a South Dakota.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it. It's either the 9th or the 16th of November. It's one of those two.
Well, this never used to happen until you were on that board, but ASBSD.org got blocked on my
Yeah, I just have
computer
that in mind too.
access.
They must be
Felt
having
proud
some
tonight.
website. They must be having some website problems.
Yep.
It's set for Friday, November 16th in Fort Pierre at 1 PM Central Time.
I'm not sure on my schedule yet, but I could, if I'm not on call at work that day, I could probably go.
Same. My work is up in the air, so I can't commit for sure.
Craig, do you have a burning desire to go or not go? It's a good time. I mean, it's.
I can go. My boss is real lenient about that if I get my stuff on the schedule early enough, so, by that I mean Tasha, she'll let me go to that, so.
Well, the floor is open for nominations for a first and an alternate.
Nominate Shelley for the main, and I can be the alternate.
Okay.
Or vice versa.
We got a nomination for Shelley and Tim. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? If not, I will, guess we'll go ahead and vote on the nominations.
Maybe we should nominate our chairman since he's not here.
There you go. All those in favor of having Tim and Shelley as our first and our alternate for the delegate for ASBSD?
She's first.
We need a motion
You need a motion for the nomination?
before you vote.
Okay,
I made a motion.
Second.
Okay.
all right, we got Tim making a motion and Shelley making a second to have them as the ASBSD delegate assembly nominees. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Our next item for discussion is an executive session under 1-25-2, subsection 2, discussing the expulsion, suspension, discipline, assignment of, or the educational program of a student, or the eligibility of a student to participate in interscholastic activities provided by the South Dakota High School Activities Association. I would ask for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of going into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And I will note that we will be coming back out of executive session with one item of business. We are in executive session.
Still there, Kurt? Shelley Simmons is the delegate and Tim's the alternate. And because. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my work is not up in the air at all. All right, so everybody's work is up in the air.
Well, let me tell you how delegate assembly goes. Whoever shows up, and then they let everybody be delegates.